glad you could join me again today. We've spent the last several weeks looking at ways of taking care of us, and I hope that you're starting to see the importance of doing so, taking responsibility for your health and your emotions, your relationships, and the different ways that it's important for us to take care of ourselves. But then I began to think, it's really easy and possible to move from self-care into self-love, and that's something that's vastly different. So today we're going to look at the difference of those two things. Self-care means that you're doing things that help you to remain healthy, basically, in all these different areas. But self-love is doing things that feed your desires. Not necessarily about self-care. It can also sometimes lead us into things that are not healthy. So I came across a list of things, of different types, maybe I should say it that way, of different types of self-love, and I hope that you can see the difference as we kind of go through these things. So let's start with our emotions. Self-care means that we keep them in check. We balance them with scripture, and we use measured responses because we see ourselves accountable for our emotions. But self-love is exploring your emotions, letting them just have full sway, and expecting others to understand or overlook your outbursts without judging or questioning. Can you see the difference? What about social and relationships? Self-care means that we are giving and we're loving to those around us, and we're wise in how we deal with others. But self-love means that we connect in whatever way feels comfortable. There's little consideration for anyone else. It's only what makes me happy. And how do you think that that's going to turn out? Well, that brings us to physical, to self-care, meaning to honor our body that God gave us, to care for it in healthy ways and protect it from damage or outer interference. But self-love says to take care of your body however that pleases you. No one can tell you what to do. Do what feels good for you and what you should be like. Don't let anybody tell you that. Use your body to explore everything. And what's going to happen there? I think I'll leave you to answer that. Well, here's how I see the difference. Self-care is using wisdom, but self-love is misplaced affection. As Christians, we need to be aware of what the world calls this self-love. And it's the definition of the last days, isn't it? It's what we read in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 17. It gives us a real graphic description here of man's self-love, saying, knowing this also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall become lovers of their own selves. And then it goes on with a bunch of descriptions of their activities. And as Christians, we need not to be party to this. It tells us in verse 5, we are supposed to turn away from this type of self-love. But with the illusion and philosophy of the world so much in our face, so loud, it's really hard for us to turn away. You can't hardly ignore it. Well, we hear it through music and media constantly. It's taught to our children in the schools, and it's practiced in our workplace. It's even mandated in so many different ways. And it tells us that we are wrong not to participate, stupid to believe otherwise, and that we're missing out or will be left behind if we don't go along. So what do we do as Christians? How can we maintain healthy self-care when the world calls us to go farther and farther away? So let's begin by looking at some believers who faced similar situations, and let's see how they reacted. Well, we can start with Noah, can't we? When we think about him, we imagine his situation. He and his family were the only ones on the face of the earth who loved and believed God. The only one. Can you believe that? That's an amazing thing to think about. No one else believed like they did. No one else heard from God in prayer. No one went to church, even though there wasn't a church during Noah's time, but no one set aside time to worship God. And then God asked Noah to do something completely unheard of in their society, to build an ark. And not just a little ark, a huge ark. And to preach about the end of the world, a flood and rain falling from the skies. They'd never seen such a thing. I can just imagine the taunting in the headlines, crazy preacher still building a boat, or odd family waits for mystical rain. They would have been the laughing stock of their society. But did that stop them? Even though they were the only ones, did they give up on God? Did they cave in? No, they didn't. They stood fast by their principles and beliefs, and when the rain began and the door closed behind them in safety, I'm sure they knew they'd made the right decision. You know, dear friend, we will face some hard decisions too if we're going to choose wise self-care over self-love. And what about Joshua? He watched Moses lead the people, and he and Caleb then spied out the land, and they were ready to go and take the Canaan land that God had promised. And now, 40 years later, and the Israelites still weren't ready to follow God, so he put before them a challenge. He said, "Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the God of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And you know, we face the same challenge today. Which God are we going to serve? The God of this world or the God of heaven? And that might seem like an extreme choice considering our topic of self-care, but that is exactly the choice that we must make. God calls us to responsible stewardship, and the world says, do what you want to do. So which God are you going to serve? Mary, the mother of Jesus, she's another example. She had a choice put before her as well. And who would she choose to believe? How would she respond? She knew that the world would ridicule her for her choice, and she expected to be misunderstood and ostracized. But still, she chose to trust God. She chose to care for her child and not give in to the pressure of the world around her. If any of these three had chosen self-love as their path, their stories and ours would be completely different. And that's why I say that our choices in self-care not only affect us, but they affect others also. Responsible stewardship takes everything into consideration. It isn't about what's just best for me alone. It looks at the big picture. It looks at the long-range effects of the choices that I make. And it makes decisions for the better outcome, not the momentary satisfaction. So when it comes to self-care, responsible stewardship knows that perseverance tastes better than regret, that short denial reaps much better benefits, and that consideration of others makes a happier society for us all. So let me encourage you to decipher the noise of the world around you. Don't take everything at face value. Look and see where it's going to take you if you believe it. Compare it with Scripture and be wise. And in that way, take good care of yourself. I'll see you next week.